I just want to point out before we start, this was all Mark Edwards' idea. He came to me and he said, hey Russell, how would you like to build an app live on stage? And I'm like, no, there is no way on earth I would ever like to do this. Because it's all the things that go wrong in a thing. You got Xcode, which goes wrong all the time. You got some need for the internet. You got some need for collaboration between, let's face it, a developer and a designer. It was never going to work. And I don't know, somehow I'm still here, Mark. Explain that one to me.
You make very, very bad life choices.
I'm terrible at saying no to people, as it turns out. So
yes.
Here we are. So we are going to attempt this. I'm going to put this out there. We don't plan to fail. We are titans of men, as I've been told. But should things go wrong, it could be good for our industry if you think about it. Because if we prove to people that you can build an app in an hour, maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe designers and developers aren't going to get, valued as much as they should be. And let's just talk about that briefly, right? So we have here a designer who's doing this for free to boost his portfolio. That's the way you get designers on board, as everyone knows. And we have a developer who, let's face it, developers are interchangeable. You have one developer, you can swap them in with another.
All the same.
It's all the same. So we have one developer, check. We have a designer working on his portfolio, check. So we're good to go.
Yes, and we just want to be clear, this is intended to be an overview of the process. Obviously, we're not going to go into every single line of code, every single pixel, why we did it. We will accept questions at any point throughout the talk, so feel free to raise your hand and say, hey, whatever. There will also be time at the end, because we're going to breeze through this. It's going to be easy.
All right, if you say so.
Yep. I think that's it. I think we're pretty much ready to rock. So.
All right, so this is, I work in the app development industry. This is how it normally goes. I'm a client. I'm like, hey, Mark, I've got an idea for an app. It's a brilliant idea. I need your help building it, though, because we need a designer. Like these days, you cannot release an app without a designer. You should know that. If you're just a developer, you need someone to help you out.
That's cool. Let me check my calendar. I think maybe next month I'm free.
Can you work for free, speaking of free?
Oh, free. I can work right now if it's free.
Hey, it's good for your portfolio.
Yes.
What I want to do, Mark, is I boil a lot of eggs. It is a well-known thing.
Yep.
I don't know. There's eggs. Eggs are amazing. Do we agree?
Yeah. Who likes eggs? Eggs, woo!
So, I think the most complex app we could possibly build on stage would be some kind of egg timer.
Yes, that sounds really good.
So look, I'm a developer. I can't lay out an egg timer to save my life. I can't even put things in the right place on the pixel screen and the 1x and the... So what on earth should this thing look like?
Well, I've got an idea.
All right.
We could build it so it's kind of like an hourglass, like a real egg timer. So it has like 3D rendered particles for the sand that fall. And what you do is it's set to a certain time. You can't change the time because that doesn't matter anyway. And you could just flip it upside down and use the gyroscope to control the timer. That sounds really good. You can do that in an hour.
All right, I'm going to pause here. Mark's just going to pause. Pretend like he's not in the room, all right? We're going to talk like he's not here. This is a typical thing you hear from a designer. They want realism. They want the fancy things. Now, the important thing to remember is that unlike developers, designers have feelings. They have real feelings. So, no, this is true. I'm going to teach you a little tip for how to deal with designers. So, I call this the Vegemite Toasty. What you need is a slice of bread. You need like a nice sort of wispy sort of comment. So I'm going to say, unpause. Mark, that's a really good idea. Pause again. Now, Mark's not going to believe me. Designers aren't idiots. They're going to figure out, they're going to see right through. You need something a bit more specific. So this is where you add the melted cheese. So I'm going to say, Mark, I like that you've referenced traditional hourglass
technology,
vocabulary. It's amazing. Now this is where you add the Vegemite, right? Because this is important. You want Mark to know that you don't quite like his idea, but you want him to get there himself. So what you say is, Mark, I really like it, and I'm sure you've already thought of this. I'm sure you have. But would it be a little bit complex to like tilt your phone up and then having to stand it there? Like, what if it falls over?
While you're cooking, you just sit it up against the wall. How hard's that?
If it falls over, like, do the grains stop?
Yeah. It's got to be realistic.
Nah.
All right.
And this is where you say, no. This is.
You could blow into the microphone, and they could like sparkle everywhere.
It's not bad. So this is where you pull out the final step. You say, Mark, I'm the client, and I really appreciate the fact that I need you to make it pop. I need you to do all that stuff. But can we come up with something a little bit simpler?
All right, we can try.
Can we get the interaction model like a little bit?
We can try. So the timer that comes with the with iOS, the standard timer, looks like this. It's kind of cool. It does the job. I don't know who uses the timer in the clock app. Everyone probably, yes, lots of people, because it's free. It's built in. It's good. I use it too. The issue I have with this is the the date picker, the time picker, is up the top of the screen, which if you've got iPhone 6 Plus or 6S Plus, it's like 2 kilometres north of where your hand normally is. That's not that great, and I'm also not necessarily a fan of this guy. It's all right, it does the job, but I think we can do better.
Oh.
And we've got plenty of time, so we can do custom widgets, right?
Oh, so this is the other thing that the designers say all the time. They want to build everything custom. The stock UI is not good enough. Everything Apple does is not good enough. I just think they want this for their dribble, Mark. This is what
That's what I want it for. We said it was from a portfolio, right? That's the whole pitch here. I usually start when I'm working on concepts, start by opening Illustrator. Everyone has different techniques. You can use paper, you can use whatever you want, you can use Sketch. This is a good way of just scribbling stuff out, I find. So if we just start here and say something like that.
I should say why Mark's doing this is that if Mark can't get this right, then I don't think any designer can. This is like the Vesper of apps.
What do you mean?
No comment. No comment. So I guess if you think about it, Mark, what does our timer need? It needs some kind of time display. I like that you put it in there.
Has to have that. So another technique I use when I'm trying to work out UI, you may not know the layout, but if you can work out what is a nice representation of each bit that you definitely know you need. We definitely know we need to show some time. We can't just show sand falling through an hourglass. It would be good. It would be better, but because you're paying me those $0, I have to do this. I have to put the time in.
That's the other thing you learn about designers. They'll be very resentful every time you knock back one of their ideas, and you won't stop hearing about it, believe you me.
And we also wanted the interaction to be down the bottom of the screen if possible. So maybe what I was thinking is we could have some slider thing that could actually extend out beyond the screen, and you could kind of slide it left and right maybe as to control the time.
It's a little bit better than the hourglass.
Yeah, a little bit better. And we could possibly have maybe some buttons that would be maybe presets. I hear that 12 minutes is a good time for cooking eggs.
Well, you heard this? You know this for sure?
I heard this. I did some prep. Jeez.
Because, Mike, I am going to check up on you. I did bring the Google with me. I'm sorry, we're at an iOS conference, I know.
No. Oh.
So I'm going to try this. How long does it take to boil an egg?
Uh-oh. Well, you can see.
According to Taste, simmer the eggs for 4 minutes for soft-boiled eggs.
All right.
For semi-firm yolks and hard whites, simmer for 5 minutes. For
For 4,
hard-boiled
5?
eggs, simmer for 8 minutes.
For 8 minutes? All right, so
okay.
This is the other thing you find about designers is they'll generally try and put in times that look really good. You know, 1 looks good, a 5, because they want symmetry. It's all about the symmetry. But you have to do some research. So you're like, no, Mark, 4, 8, and 12 minutes are actually the standard units. 4, 8, and 12.
4, 8, and 12?
Pretty sure. If it wasn't, it doesn't matter. Like, we're past that stage now.
All right, cool.
So this is not as symmetrical. You notice there'll be some kickback from Mark here because he sees that the 12 is not quite as pretty as the 15.
No, it's fine.
No, it's all right. All right.
You're the client. You're paying. So given that we have to be quite quick here, how do you like the design?
It's not bad. What do you guys think? Huh? Ship it. I like it. All right, Mark. Is there a button to export to code in here somewhere?
Not yet. So another thing I do is I very frequently use templates for everything just to speed up the process. So I have another. We're going to start working on an iPhone 4 design, mostly because they still exist and people still use them.
Anyone here got an iPhone 4? Oh, one. Just one?
Yeah,
Oh,
cool.
Respect. Mad
Awesome.
respect.
Old school. So we'll put our slider in, and I'm just guessing these are values clearly. Might put it down here somewhere and throw some buttons in.
So is this fairly typical, Mark? You just go straight to, is this Photoshop?
Yeah, this is Photoshop.
Okay, and you just start laying stuff out.
Yep. Hey, that's not right. Yeah, definitely. Obviously everyone works differently and everyone can work differently, but we typically mock up things in a pixel perfect fashion in Photoshop. Other people use Illustrator, Sketch, whatever.
You're designing at 1x, is that right? That's a Mark Edwards thing, or?
Yes, so the resolution we're using here, even though I said iPhone 4 size, as in aspect ratio, we're actually working at the 1x, the original iPhone resolution, and the reason for that is because it maps perfectly to iOS points, which is exactly what you're going to need in the code. It looks low res, so some people don't like working this way because you don't see the high fidelity thing, but it solves so many issues. It means your icons are going to look great at 1x, 2x, and 3x when they get scaled, and there's a whole bunch of other benefits. So it makes life easy, even though it's a low-res preview. If we zoom in here, you can see up here that it's old school.
Jagged pixels.
Old school.
Such
So,
jagged.
Yep.
All right.
So we'll throw in.
This is the bit where you go. Go, Mark. Go. You've obviously done this before.
How much time do we have?
We are rapidly running out of time. So this is how the process normally goes, right? You interact with some kind of designer. You either contract out to them, or in the case of our company, you sucker one in to come work for you full time, because they're cheaper that way. I don't know if you know, full-time salaries are way cheaper than contracting salaries. And a good designer can actually demand a good salary, so you need to grab them early. So out of university, out of TAFE, wherever these designer types come from, if you can get them before they go to like an Apple or a Google, you can get them super cheap. That's my advice to anyone starting a company. Mark Edwards, for example, you've got no hope in getting him. The only way you're going to get him is you're like, oh, we need a keynote presenter, Mark. And Mark, for some reason, he's into the keynote, so he'll be there for that. So you can see he's kind of laying out the elements here. I'm sure he's thinking about where to put them. The buttons are centered.
Exactly where to put them.
Timer's in the middle. Oh, do we think about colours at this point, Mark, or does that come later?
We do, because we don't have long.
So at this point, normally you and your designer would argue about what is the best colour? What does yellow represent to a person? And yellow represents the aesthetic appeal of the egg, I feel. And that's why there's a yellow button, I assume, Mark, because you want to capture the essence of an egg. And there is yellow in an egg, is there not?
There is.
Orange, maybe? I don't know what the orange is in there for. I guess we're about to find out.
Because it's good. We can change it if you want.
And there is another important requirement, which I told Mark, I cheated, I told him before the conference, is that I want my egg timer to be usable at night. Because I cook all of my eggs at night. People who eat eggs during the day, disgusting. And it is, I'm sorry, I don't want to judge you. I'm not here to judge you, but it is disgusting. So I needed a dark theme, and dark themes are all the rage. I don't know if you've noticed. iOS has been very kind of bright white colours, tiny little fonts that no one can read. And it's slowly progressing towards like fatter fonts and darker themes. So I made sure that Mark was all over that. I wanted something that worked in the dark. Very important. So how are we doing, Mark?
We're going pretty well. I just need to put some little things down here.
Is this some kind of ruler?
Yes, it is a kind of ruler. Because we need a slider for the time, right?
Okay, yeah.
So, right?
So at this point, I'm going to save myself some time, right? I'm going to go into the Xcode, and you're not going to be able to see this. This is all magic, smoke, and mirrors. I'm going to say File, New Project. Very important. That's how all Xcode projects start. I'm stuck on this screen now. It's like, master detail application, page-based application. I'm going to go for single view application, Mark, because I'm guessing our thing's only going to have a single view, yeah?
I think so. I think that's all we have time for, so that would be good.
We need a name. I don't know if you know, the important thing in app development is you've got to print T-shirts, business cards, socks. Socks are insanely important. If you don't have socks, I don't know how you're launching a product. But in order to do that, you need a good name. So it's an egg timer. We want it to be pretty precise, maybe like exact.
It has to be precise, because otherwise your eggs are going to be overcooked.
Exactly, and no one likes overcooked eggs. I don't know. I don't even know what happens when you overcook an egg, because my timers have always been so precise.
Can anyone think of a fitting egg pun?
I'm going...
Egg perfect?
Egg perfect. I'm going with Exacto, Mark.
That's good.
Because it's got to be exact. So we're going to call our project Exacto. We're modern developers, so only Philistines use Objective-C. We're going for Swift, obviously. Only a fool would try and develop a universal app that runs on iPad and iPhone up here at the lectern, so we're going to go iPhone only, very important. We're not going to tick the core data box, because that's a little bit evil.
May as well.
Oh no, you've shown them what I'm doing now. Unit testing, sorry Stu, I saw you walk in, no unit testing. Forget that. UI test, I don't even know what those are, to be honest. We're just going to untick that. All right, and now it wants us to put it somewhere. And I'm like, as a developer, I know I should be storing stuff in a Git repository. Oh, look, live version. Oh, I've accidentally dumped it in the wrong folder. There you go. This happens on stage. It needs a version number. 1.0 seems like a good one. This is build 1. Code signing. I'm not insane enough to do anything with that box there. I'm definitely not pressing it. So, yeah, the developers know. For those that don't know, when you press this button, all sorts of magical weirdness happens, and your thing is filled with signing profiles and provisioning things, and basically it will never run again, is how this works. Well, I've launched... Where the hell am I?
It's all right, we can come back here for a sec. So we're getting a bit closer on the mock-up. One thing we don't have is the ruler down the bottom kind of doesn't really indicate where you are at the current time. So we can throw in a little arrowy thing down the bottom. Seems good.
Is that the technical term?
Yeah, I think it could be.
Oh, I know what I did. I put this, see? I put it into the wrong folder. Well done, Russell.
I think we're done. I think we have a perfect pixel perfect mock-up. Don't look at it too closely. Now that we've done that, I can save out a mock-up for Russell, so he knows exactly what to build.
So this
cannot be any different to the mock-up, because that's how it works.
This is the other thing you find about designers. They're very precious about those pixels. Like, I've actually worked with Mark in the past a few times. Huge mistake, by the way. Don't ever work directly with a designer. Try and be the boss of the project if you can. Because he does this thing where he'll send you essentially an image diff. So there'll be your design, and there'll be his design behind it. And how do you do that? It's like an opacity thing.
Right,
You actually blend between the two.
Let me just do some magic. I'll see if I can find one really quickly.
It's all right. So this is our project as it currently stands. It is a thing of beauty. So I don't know how we're going to take this to a working product, but we'll try, Mark.
All right, go back here. So we're ready to export some assets. I've exported a mock-up for Russell to have a look at. And now there's different ways to do this, again, depending on your chosen poison as a designer. For me, I like using Photoshop and slices. There's a slice feature to export bits and pieces. We don't need too many bits with this app. We just need the little arrow thing down the bottom, which is here.
Oh, naming it. I like it.
Yeah, I am.
Very important.
Naming it.
I may have been paying out Mark about his group naming before, because when you duplicate stuff in Photoshop, you get group 1, group 2, group 2016.
Yeah, well, it may have been done in a hurry.
So apparently that's bad practice, I'm told, because if you have another designer come across your project, the last thing they want to drill down is through like 300 layers of things that say group 1, group 2, group 316. So I like that you've named your layers, Mark. Very nice.
Now, how many minutes do we want this slider to cover? Do you have a...
Well, the Google said 12, but I think it can't go to 11 because 12 is higher than 11. We should go to 20.
That sounds good.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh, what if you're cooking an ostrich egg? Is it like an African ostrich? Is it like a Swedish ostrich? These
isn't called ostrich actually.
Egg timer.
So, it's maybe that'll be an in-app purchase.
The other thing you want to be careful of is when your designer's giving you assets is that if you're not going to be working with that designer again, like if they're not in-house or whatever, then at the start of the project, which is something I forgot to ask Mark, you just slide this in there. You don't want to be too obvious about it. Be like, can I have your PSD when you're finished?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so that's important because then you have the source material. If they only give you the PNG files and the assets, then you're stuck with that. It's very hard to add things to the end of the ruler or change button colors. I mean, you can do it, but it's not recommended. If you've got the original source material, it's just like having source code. You can go in there and edit it. I'm not saying you want to screw the designer out of the process at the end, but if it's cheaper, you do what you got to do. So now watching Mark work his magic, we kind of know what Mark's building here. We're going to go in here, and we are going to use storyboards. I don't normally use storyboards. I'm a fan of Zibs. I don't really know how storyboards work, but this is the default thing that comes with it. So we know we need a label. We're going to drop one on here. We want it to look kind of like realistic, so we're going to put the time in there. We know the font size has to be bigger, and I'm going to guess Mark used about font size 42 maybe.
That's it.
Oh wow, there you go. I'm a professional. We're going to do this for now, and we're like, all right, it's going to sit somewhere in the center of the screen. We know we need some buttons, so Mark had 4 buttons there in the middle. So we're going to have to drop a view in. We go like, boom, view. All right, we need some buttons. So button 1. And now we're going to do like some really fancy button duplication. So we know this button has to be 1 minute. We know that Mark, being the designer that he is, gave the button a background color. So like, thanks Mark, appreciate that. It was somewhere in the yellow spectrum. We'll get the colors from Mark like later, that'll do. Yeah, perfect. And now we need to duplicate this button. So we need 4 of them. Too easy, 1 over here, 1 over here, 1 over here. We now have 4 buttons. Quickly check in on Mark. How's he doing?
Pretty good, just nudging stuff around.
He's got to get this pixel perfect. It's very important. The other thing we know is that Mark wants a slider. So there are a million ways to build a slider, but if we know he's exporting a ruler this long and the screen's this long, we're like, cool, we'll use a scroll view that's built into iOS. It means we don't have to do much mucking around. We chucked it down the bottom, and we assume that Mark's going to be giving us some kind of image. So we grab our image, we chuck it into the scroll view, and we worry about how that scrolls around a bit later. So now if we run this, through the magic of the Xcode, ta-da! And now you know something interesting. You're like, oh, that's weird. I thought I laid it in the center of the screen. So those of you who are developers know exactly what's going on. Those of you that are designers, we have to use something called auto layout. You got to lay stuff out. You got to tell it you want it centered. Otherwise, it does like weird stuff like this to it. And auto layout is one of those things that you hear developers swearing a lot. And generally, this is one of the things we swear at. I'm not going to do it here on stage. I promise. How are we going, Mark?
Pretty good if you want to switch back.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so I've set up some slices in Photoshop, and I'm just going to name them. So we'll just call this one slider, and we'll call this one arrow. Amazing, very creative names. And so as I said, there's lots of different ways to export, different tools. This is how I do it. So I've set up some slices in Photoshop, and I actually have some actions to export to 1x, 2x, and 3x. So if I just click that, magic stuff happens, including Hazel runs some cool stuff to change the file name. So what I do is I export to a 2x folder and a 3x folder that's in a known location. Hazel renames them and puts them all into the one place. So this is to make up for some Photoshop deficiencies. Does anyone here use Hazel? No, yes. There'll be links. We've actually got a page that has all links to all the tools and everything we've used. So we now have some assets for Russell to use. So what I can do is I can copy them into here. I'll just call them, put them in there. And them, here's the fun part of the talk. So I've now got a mock-up and some assets for Russell. And who uses Git? Who loves Git? Yes, some people, lots of people. Awesome, cool. What about designers who use Git?
Oh.
Wait, yeah, that's actually the expected result. Git is amazing. Git is really cool. Again, we've got lots of different links. This is a tool called Git Tower. It works with GitHub. If you're a designer, it's definitely worth getting into Git. It is beneficial in many, many ways. Now, let me just try and do this. Live demo and internet on stage.
It's almost like someone told us not to do that, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm having some flashbacks here. So Mark's going to put that stuff in Git, and that's really important to version control this stuff because these assets could change over time. It's nice to know when they changed. It's nice to know, especially if you're working with clients and they're like, oh, actually, I preferred the design I did before. It's very easy to go back, whereas I guess in Photoshop, that stuff's a lot harder to do if it's not source control.
Yeah, so generally speaking, you cannot version control your main design documents because most of the design tools use big binary files, and they might be like 700 meg, and you change one tiny thing, and then when you go back to Git, you have to push the entire file back onto the repo. So your developers will hate you if you use Photoshop or Sketch documents or Illustrator documents with Git, but the actual assets themselves, they can definitely go on there, and the mock-ups can go on there as well, which is exactly what I've done. So I've just the most recent commit, put all this stuff onto the repo that we have for this project, and now Russell, with the magic of the internet, can get them over there.
All right, so let's do this. We're going to go into our repository folder. We're going to look in here. We're going to find the design assets. Cool. All right. So you'll see this is the kind of stuff that our designers provided us. So there's a mock-up. You're like, cool. Okay, I know what this is going to look like. There's ones for different phones. So you can see the designer's trying to hint at stuff here. So on a squishy phone, like our friend down the back there has, you get a slightly squishier design. That's a technical term. And then if you go up, you see, okay, that thing's meant to remain about the center, but everything else looks like it's kind of anchored to the bottom. You're like, cool, I understand that. The other thing you'll notice is that our designer seems to be hinting at some kind of touchdown state here. And that's cool. So someone can know, like, oh, press the button, very important. Also, as a developer, what you tend to do is ignore that stuff the first time around, because if you can get away with it, then why put all this extra work on yourself? So we've got our assets folder
Thanks.
here.
That's great.
That's how it
really
works. Xcode has, of course, locked up briefly. So we know we need some assets. We've got those. We've got an arrow. So all right, let's. Pro tip, I'm sure every single person in this room knows this, but if you don't, you can grab those assets, you can drag them directly into your asset catalog, and look, makes a file called arrow. It never used to do that. It used to be a huge pain in the something to do that. Mark has made us some app icons. This is the fun of working with iOS. You have to try and do a bit of maths. You're like, okay, 29 times 2 is 58. So
Should we do the app icon later, or do you want to put it in now?
that'll do. Done. So we go back to our storyboard. Suddenly our buttons have gone yellow and big. I don't know, that's weird. It's like someone else was doing that while you weren't watching, Mark. So the important thing is Mark wants these things in the center, right? So, all right, let's do it. Auto layout, we want to center horizontally. We are going to let the widths be defined by the things that are inside the container, so we're not going to bother defining like a width or a height. But now it needs to know where's it going to sit in the vertical sense. So if we look back at Mark's design, we know that it's gone. So we know that it was anchored to the bottom. So we go, okay, we're going to anchor our scroll view to the bottom. Vertical spacing to bottom layout guide. There you go. That's a storyboards thing. We want to anchor this to either side of the screen. So we go leading and trailing. You can also press this Darth Vader looking button down here and actually do it from here. We'll just do it this way. I don't know because I like to. So you got trailing. It needs to know how big it's going to be. I think, Mark, your asset was
88 points
No, I mean in height.
for the slider.
Yeah.
Yeah, 88 points.
Oh, sorry. Mark was giving me a height. There you go. You've got to listen to your designer. And we can lock that in because we know that's not going to change. We're like, right, the height is 88 points. Now we want to anchor our button view to that. Mark's button view was a bit lower. So we're okay, cool. We'll go, yeah, just anchor yourself to this thing.
Yeah, wherever you want to stick it. We don't know.
All right.
Time is counting down.
Okay. So this is all really interesting stuff. You can mess around in here for ages. It just so happens that there's a weird Xcode project sitting down here where we've already anchored all this stuff. And as it turns out, it's very happy with the way we've laid it out, and that's good. This is your user interface done. So what we have is you've got the label, where the time's going to go. You've got the actual buttons that you can press. Mark wants this thing to be, what is this thing called? A ruler to be slidey, so that if you slide it to 20, it'll just immediately start ticking back.
We're calling it the slider, the egg slider.
The egg slider.
Egg slider, yep.
It's eggs.
Yeah, it's like a burger, but it's egg.
Okay. So what we're going to do, because let's face it, you can't actually build an app in an hour. I'm sorry, people, this is a lie. We're going to grab this view from over here in this magic Xcode project we created before, and we're going to dump it straight in here. We're like, ta-da!
Ta-da!
Ta-da! So the only thing we're missing is your ruler assets, Mark, which we can add. So we'll go find those in here. Oh, this is very bad. We should have, just another pro tip, you meant to take Mark's images folder, put it in here, and now you got permanent access to it. Something in here called a slider, there it is. Drop that in. All right, so now we've got our rulery thing. If we go back to our storyboard, the ruler's in there. Cool. So now we have essentially a hooked up user interface, but what we don't have is all the code bits for it. So I guess this is what we promised here, coding live on stage. So we hop over here, there's our view controller. It is completely empty, not pre-canned view controller. Aren't you all impressed? So we need some button actions. When you press those buttons, something has to happen. Now remember this, nothing about this demo is canned. Oh. Oh no, my screen's locked. This is terrible. Fingerprint unlock to the Notes app. Where are we, Mark? Oh, that's right. Nothing about this demo is canned, like I said. So we need some actions. We need some IB outlets for our stuff. Oh, whoa. There they are.
That's impressive.
That's amazing. So an IB outlet, for those that don't know, is just a way of hooking up something in the interface file with something in the actual code. So when I tap this button, this function will be executed. So we're going to quickly hook these up. We're like, and Xcode's like, no, don't want to. All right, so I think we also need our set timer function, which it seems to be complaining about. That's cool, we can do that. If you think about it, there are a few different ways to build a timer. And this is an important thing about being a developer is sometimes you have to separate the data model from the visual model. Visually, what's happening is the time is ticking down. So your first instinct is going to be, okay, I set it to 2 minutes or whatever, and every second I just decrement 1 from that. That would kind of work. You run into some problems with the way timers fire. They don't exactly fire every 1,000 milliseconds or whatever. You probably don't care about the details, but the point is sometimes you have to design things differently at the data layer to the visual layer. And what you essentially, the best way I think to build a timer, we've decided, is you want the end time, because that's a precise time. You're like, this is the time is going to end, and everything else that happens around it is going to be visual. So we obviously need a timer method. If we can get 2 T's, boom, we've got a way to set our timer. So we want a variable called end time, which is the time it's going to end. iOS has this useful thing in it. If we just type this in here, some constants for us later. iOS has this concept of an NS time interval. So there is a unit of time built in. It's measured in seconds. It can have like precision lower than that. We should probably use it. It's built into the language. So we call it an end time. And we can say, I don't know, it's equal to 0 because programmers love 0, and it's an NS time interval. So now we have, okay, this is the time that our timer is going to end. We have a way to set it down here. The thing that we're doing here is, I got this, shortcuts. Whoa. Command Alt 0. There we go. Again, iOS has the concept of NSDate in the foundation classes. The Unix programmers out there and the Java heads will love the fact that we've referenced it from 1970, because there is nothing better in the code than seeing the 1st of the 1st, 1970 as like something's gone wrong. We've declared it as a let, which is a very bad idea because we have to be able to change it. And so now it's happy. We've got our end time being set, and now we need some way of actually having the timer tick, because if you've set the end time and that's it and you wait till you get there, the user's going to be a bit bored. They're not going to see anything. They're going to be like, like this is no good at all. And so we have to have a way to keep that moving, yeah? And we also have to, how do we keep that moving, Mark? That's a very good idea. So we need a function.
Got to have a function.
UI, update, timer. Cool, so in there we're going to do something that will visually like update the user interface, and now it should actually let us hook these things up. Oh, Xcode's like, it's not happy at all. It doesn't want to do it.
That's right.
That's fine. What's that?
Drag from the function to the button.
You can do that? Whoa, look at that.
Everybody's learning today. Thanks.
That is impressive. Did you know you could do that?
I did not know you could do that.
So now if we were to run this, it would set the end time. It's like, cool. The problem is we've got nothing defined for like what on earth happens. So what do we want to happen, Mark?
Well, maybe it could explode in sand. I realize we don't have time for that. Maybe just a sound.
A sound.
A sound.
Mark. I know you haven't provided this design, and you should not normally bring other things in that your designer hasn't designed. I've got this, which could be something we have in the end. It's not a sound though. I do happen to have one of those here. If I play it, no one's going to be able to hear it, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to drop it into our project. So we're going to expand this out. We're going to drop the sound in. It's called Explosion Mono, so that'll keep Mark happy. We want it in there, yep. So when it finishes, we want to play a sound. How do you do that on iOS? There's a few different ways. You can use AV Player, you can use the sound libraries. This is a very short sound, so we probably want to use the lowest level API that we have. So let's get rid of that. You need to, obviously, you get the file path, not that exciting. You set it up if it hasn't been set up, and you play it. So now when our timer's finished, we've got a play amazing sound, that's good. I reckon we should maybe flash the time as well.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
Think about it. If the user has their phone muted, or perhaps their hearing is not so good, probably not the greatest idea in the world to have just the sound and nothing else. So we want to flash the time, yeah? So the way we do that is, I'm really fast at typing. It's amazing. There are several ways to do animations in iOS. You can do UI view-based animations. This one seems more like a core animation type thing because we want it to repeat. So what we're saying there is we want to take the opacity, which is how, whether it's solid or whether it's completely transparent. We're going to take it down to 0.1, which is almost sort of transparent. 500 milliseconds, do you reckon? What's a good duration? Do designers have a guide for this?
That's half a second. That works in English. Yep.
Done.
That's good.
We want it to repeat forever because we want people to get the idea, like take your egg out of the thing. It's going to die. It's not good. Auto reverses just means when the animation gets to the end, it'll start from the beginning, pretty obvious. Designers love timing functions. They can't get enough of them. They draw little curves of like, it can go slow and then it can go fast. Ease in and ease out. It's always a good one if you're stuck with something else. And then we want to update our label. So we want to say, okay, add the animation into our label, so our label will actually do the flashy thing. Some of the other stuff we need to do, we need to be able to format the time on screen. So just showing someone the amount of seconds is probably not the greatest idea on earth. Swift has a lot of formatting functions. It has a new formatting library. Russell doesn't know how to use it. Russell is a huge fan of NSString, which he learnt many years ago. So this is how you format two numbers in the NSString world, is you say you want the first one to be 1 or more digits. You say you want the second one to always be 2 digits no matter what. So you get 1, 0, 1 if there's only 1 second remaining. That's important. We need to hook up some of our other stuff, don't we, Mark?
Certainly do.
So the other thing we've got to do is the scrolly bits. So Marcus said when you flick this, it has to scroll, right? That's very important. So the way you do that in the iOS world is with a scroll view delegate. It's a standard sort of pattern in iOS to say, hey, this thing is the delegate for my other thing. That means when something happens in there, it'll trigger actions. So we go back to our view controller and we go, all right, somewhere in here we should define like all our UI scroll view delegate stuff. So again, I'm very fast at typing. Whew. Okay, so here's the important stuff. We need to know when the user's started dragging, obviously. We need to know when the drag is going on. Very important. As they're dragging it around, we want to actually figure out what the new time is. So if they drag to 10 minutes, it's got to be at 10 minutes. If they drag at 15, 15. We need to know when they finish dragging. And the important thing here is not when they let go. It's when the thing finishes decelerating and sort of comes to a stop. And then the last thing is we want to handle the case where the user's being a little bit tricky and they're like just moving their finger and then lifting their finger and there's no deceleration whatsoever. So we got both of those cases handled. All right, Mark, I don't know if you've got any more for me. So we need a variable for telling us if the user's scrolling or not. We need a remaining time label. We'd also need the soundy stuff. So let's quickly hook that up. We're going to go in here. Hot one. Oh. Cool. So the thing we're missing is we don't have a... What are you doing? There we go. So we don't have our remaining time label. Very important if you actually want to be able to update something. So we'll drop that in. We'll call it a remaining time label. Some people are really against putting the word label on the end of labels and stuff. I think it's not worth in the programming world being too dogmatic. If something's a label and you want to call it a label, feel free to call it a label. If you want to call it just remaining time, feel free. The last thing you want to call it is RT or something like that, because when someone comes along and they're like, I don't know what that is, and that's your fault, sort of not theirs. So I think now, Mark, we have all the basic elements. We don't have a sound to play, which is fine. We need to update the screen time, yeah? That's the last bit we're missing?
Yes.
Cool.
Certainly.
So we need to start updating some of these visual elements. And because I can see we're running out of time here, we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to scroll down here. Oh, it's like someone wrote this before. That's pretty interesting. We're going to use our fancy Xcode shortcuts. And we're going to be looking for start UI update timer. There it is. Oh, I probably could have written that myself. Look at that. So I don't want to bore you too much. We're going to go back into the code. Down here, we need to create one of these. Where did it go? There it is. Oh. Cool. So now we have in iOS, you've got the concept of an NS timer. It's a really handy class just for doing things that happen on a regular basis. We're going to call a timer did fire method when that happens. It's going to repeat because we want it to tick along, obviously. And we want to store a reference to it so that we can cancel it if we need to. So if the user happens to drag to the end or something like that, that's fine. We need to cancel it. So let's drop that in here. Cool, we'll make it optional. That's what the question mark means, because we don't have to have one if we don't want to. Comment these things out for now. Oh. I think now we have almost everything. Oh, we need a way to stop the timer, which is probably important, and this is going to complain. So, getting lost a bit. Here we go. So, let's create one of these. So, the stopping a timer is really simple. There's just one method on it that you can check, and it's just timer.invalidate. And all that means is, hey, like finish up. We can set it to nil because we're old school programmers and we like sort of sending stuff to nil. Very important. And the last thing we need is, I'll set that to 1 for now, is we need this timer did fire method. So every time the timer ticks, it's going to call this method. And this is where we want to do our UI stuff. And again, this is where we're going to skip over to here and be like, how do we implement this before?
If only every project had another project that was already built that you could just copy and paste from. That would be awesome.
So we'll comment those things out for now. So we kind of have something that should half work now. We'll see if this compiles, yeah? Build succeeded. That's amazing.
Are you using Swift 3 and Xcode 8?
No, we're not
You're
using
not.
Swift 3 and Xcode. Because those two things together, they like to crash a lot. So we thought we wouldn't subject you to that. All right, so what should happen now? We click 1 minute.
Hey,
Ticks down. Magical. We slide this ruler. It changes. That's pretty impressive. And when it gets to the end, it'll play our sound. It'll do the flashy thing. The one bit that we're missing, though, is it looks a little bit weird that ruler doesn't tick along. You're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like
Yeah, it should definitely move.
Yeah, because you've given the user a visual representation of something, and you're kind of breaking that mental model by not having that move. So we can quickly hook that up. We just hit a stop button here. We'll go back to our code. Get rid of the dual views. So the thing that we're missing is, okay, we need some reference to the scroll view so we can actually move it along. Let's do that. Whoop. So we go back to our storyboard file. We expand, not that thing, this thing. And we grab our scroll view, which is down here. And again, we just drop it into our project. So we go to the top, we're like, cool, we need a scroll view. Give it some sensible name, I don't know, timer scroll view. It's in our project now, which means that as it's ticking along, we can actually update it. And the way to do that is, and I'll just make this big so you can see. Oh, man, this is really hard to do on stage. You know what? This is a really bad idea, Mark, I'll tell you now.
What's it like working on a 12-inch screen?
No, it's hard. That's the other thing is normally as a developer, I'm working on a 34-inch screen plugged into like a Mac Pro. This is a little bit different. So the way to do that is we've cheated a little bit. We know that Mark has given us an image where it's 40 pixels or 40 points if you want to call them every second. We're like, cool. So how much time is remaining? We times that by the amount of pixels per second, and that's what we set the scroll view's content offset to. So if we've done that correctly and we hit go, and we highlight this thing.
I know there's a lot of copying and pasting, but I'm still impressed that it hasn't failed yet. And now it will.
Yeah. So you can see now that it's ticking along. You're like, that's cool. The thing is actually moving. It's moving quite...
It's slowly, but you can see it moving. See the shimmering of the pixels.
Okay. At this point, we have a working prototype. We finished. We can hand it back to... I know I'm the client, but we hand it back to the designer and we're like, Mark, what do you think?
I think it's pretty awesome. I mean, we could probably do a little bit more auto layout work, but do we need an app icon?
We need an app icon. I think the other thing we need, Mark, is... See how that time is doing this thing?
Oh, yeah. That's not good enough at all. So
How do you fix that?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
So when I say this thing, I mean that the time, see how when the 1 is smaller than the 2, is smaller than the 0, so it keeps going in and out, which is visually quite distracting.
Yeah, so this is actually a new thing. The old iOS font, Helvetica, had monospaced numbers. Apple's new sexy font, San Francisco, has proportional width numbers. So we would like, if possible, to have monospaced numbers so that our egg timer doesn't jump around a lot because we'll get bad reviews on the App
I'll
Store.
tell you what, we'll switch to Mark. He'll start working on the icon. And I'll see if I can go to stackoverflow.com, which is where every programmer should be going. And we'll figure out how to monospace the font.
Awesome. So let's work on an app icon. Again, I'm starting from another template. This is actually a template that I built myself and is freely available. Again, we'll have a link at the end so you can go and grab it yourself. Actually, because I'm a bit of a masochist, I built it for every single design tool. So there's Photoshop, Sketch, Illustrator, Affinity Designer, all of them. So this shows all the iOS app icon sizes. You'll notice there's a lot of them. The grey ones are actually ones that aren't needed, but everything else is color-coded. So the light blue is the 1x size, the purple is the 2x, and the red is the 3x. We also need an app icon for the App Store, which is the large one. So given that we're making an egg timer, there is actually a little bit of a cheat to shortcut, especially if you want to test an app icon idea. I'm using Smart Objects here in Photoshop, and that will actually provide all the sizes. There are some serious issues with doing this for production, but certainly when you're on stage and you don't have much time, or even if you're just trying to work something out, using Smart Objects is fine. The downside is that they get bitmap scaled, and I'll show what that looks like in a second. So we're using yellow as a UI colour, so that might work. That might be good.
Yeah, like an egg. Very important.
Yep, like an egg. Has to look like an egg. And maybe, in fact, actually, I'm not going to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it properly.
Oh.
Why do it badly? Is that the 60? No, it's 76.
So is this where you wish Apple had made some kind of vector icon format for iOS?
No, not at all. No, I'm happy with bitmaps, but I would like it. It would be nice if they kind of related in some kind of way rather than just being all haphazard sizes, because that makes life really...
You're not happy with 57.5 point?
No.
Does like an icon size? No,
No,
okay,
no,
that's weird.
I'm not at all. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to start with the, again, starting with 1x. This is the original iPhone icon size, and go away. So this is 60 by 60 point, and given that we're making an egg timer, I thought it could be, we don't want that. I thought it could be kind of cute if we maybe did a little chicken face. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah.
Although, are we reminding our users of like where the eggs come from? Is that a good move?
It's
Like you call it beef, not cow, right? You're putting a chicken on the front. I don't know about this.
yeah, we only have a certain amount of time, Russell, so I'm happy to take many suggestions, but not that one.
So, for those of you that have developed apps sort of on your own time, is this the typical sort of process that goes on? Would you describe this as a typical project? Yeah? Tim's nodding his head. He's like, yeah, sure is. This is what they do at Realm, Tim? Yeah, so normally at this point there's a lot of backwards and forwards. Like obviously it's very rare that you'll get behind your designer and just be like, just nudge it up a bit, just nudge it up. Because that would be really annoying, would it not? And the same for design and code. Like you do kind of throw stuff over the fence a little bit, and then there's a little bit of collaboration to be like, we kind of envisioned something different. And that's where the designer would go off and do some tweaking. And the same thing with code. Like you'd show someone a prototype and they're like, yeah, that's all right, but I think we can do better. So we obviously only have an hour. There would be normally a lot more sort of back and forth that would happen. Although, I've got to say, I'm pretty happy with this, Mark. It's a very...
You like it?
It's a very dark-looking icon.
It's all right, we'll give it a little bit more colour. bit of a beak in there, and... Whee.
Wow, that is really cool. And this is also where you start to feel jealous. So if you're a developer and you watch a designer working, you're like, man, I wish I could draw pixels.
I wish I could write code. Everything is sad.
That you read a lot of blog posts about. There's a lot of designers that are like, you've got to learn how to code because that's the complete experience. And there's a lot of coders who are like, you've got to learn how to design. But there's also nothing wrong with just working with someone who's good at their craft and you're good at yours. Like you don't need to be good at everything, I don't think. That's a personal opinion though. If someone here is good at both, that's fine. Good for you. I'm not jealous or anything. I'm envious.
All right.
Oh.
So, yeah, what we're going to do now is magical shortcuts. So I'm just going to make this, we started at the 60 by 60 point, which is the original iPhone icon size. And the cool thing about that is it scales to, because this is an iPhone app, so we care mostly about the not necessarily the 1x, but we're starting there anyway because it gives us a perfect 2x and 3x size, so it'll look great on an iPhone 6 Plus screen. I'm actually just going to cheat a little bit.
Mark Edwards, how could you?
And we are going to use, it's good though, because it'll demonstrate something as well.
All right.
So we're going back to the template, and we'll open the smart object. Hey, that's not what I wanted. So I've just moved, I made the icon 1024 by 1024 and moved it into this, did I really? Oh, there we go, cool. Moved it into the smart object, and the good thing about that is what it now does is in the template, we now have all the sizes built. And it's a good example of showing this icon here. So this is, have a look, where's our group? There it is. So we have the 60 by 60 size built perfectly with vector shapes, and these other ones have been created by bitmap scaling. So you can see, even though we built the big version at 1024, when you scale it down, you get a lot of these really nasty scaling artifacts. So if you can, you're definitely better off building icons at every single size you need and using vector scaling and generated techniques rather than just bitmap scaling or using, I think there's a whole bunch of tools that do it as well. You can give it a big image and it'll scale it down for you. That's great, it saves you a whole bunch of time, but it looks terrible, so please don't do that. In this case, we are going to do it. Because we don't have time. So I'll just turn off the masks, and again, I've got some magical exporting pixie dust. Actually, I'll just clear out. Old assets are still there. So again, I've got, these are all set up as slices in Photoshop that give you the correct size and name. And if I just click export, run some fancy stuff, and we now have all the sizes we need for the project. So I can just copy those into the actual project, into the images folder, so Russell can grab them, and I can commit them to Git again. So.
This is where we get to another important point actually, is that in the developer world, there are a lot of, I don't know if you noticed, there are a lot of wars about technology and stuff. Mark uses something called Tower.
Because it's the best.
Because it's the best, yeah, this is the correct way to argue. I use something called Source Tree because it's the best. And so you have a lot of different tools to get the job done.
Tabs, spaces, tabs.
Tabs, always tabs. Oh! We can talk about this later. So, we have an icon?
We have an icon, and it's the best icon ever. We're not changing it because we have 9 minutes, 23, 22, 21.
All right, go. So Mark is here, he's suggesting that we're starting to run out of time. So I'm just going to quickly take Mark's icon. Oh, I've dropped it in there, it's amazing. I've got his arrow as well, which is very important, we were missing that before. We've got his slider asset. It's good to go, I think, Mark. I've also been to stackoverflow.com, just like I promised, and it turns out this is how you monospace a font. I don't know if this is the most efficient way. It's not worth worrying about. The code looks all right. It came from Stack Overflow. It's nice. This is something you can...
It had 5 upvotes.
It was a top voted comment, people.
Has to be good.
Don't knock that. This is what's called an extension in Swift. It's kind of like a category in Objective-C, but a little bit different. So what we've done is, on the UI font class, we've created a method called monospaced, and that turns our font into monospaced. It's magical. And then all we need to do is we need to say, hey, label, your font is now a monospaced font. So if we run this, we should have an icon. Oh, it's already there. So if I hit 2 minutes now and we watch it tick, see how the time no longer does this business? It's a lot less visually distracting. We've hooked this up now so we can flick it around and that ticks down. If we flick to the end, I had no idea the sound was hooked up. There you go. And they said it couldn't be done, Mark. They said it couldn't be done.
We have time left, I think.
They were right. They were dead right. The reason we finished so fast is because you're not going to be able to learn how to build an app in an hour. That's a really hard thing to do. You need to watch tutorials and stuff. We hope we've given you some exposure to how the process works. But we have with us a world-class designer, and we have with us a developer, which is all you need, one developer. So we thought rather than us burn through the entire time, it'd be nice for people to ask some questions. So if you've got some questions about how the UI side of things work or the code side of things work,
Yep.
Yes.
So you spoke about throwing stuff over the fence, and that in the real world there's a lot more back and forth. You got the visual side all up and running in no time, and then started with a blank canvas for developing. What method did you come up with to minimise that throwaway, the throwing over the fence, the starting again? I'm going to look up what design that's integral and reinvent the whole thing.
Can I say this?
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
Great. So the question was, how do you minimize wastage when trying to work out the design and what the app is? Is that sums it up well? And also the backwards and forwards.
You built the app once, and then you had to start again.
Right. So you're talking about iteration. How do you iterate? How do you minimize the amount of work there?
How do you minimise the throwaway? Is there anything you can pass on other than intent?
I like things you can give the developer, like is there some way you can export code or you can
Right.
give me some
So
kind
one thing I did when we were building this for the first time to check that we could actually do it, although we actually just magically did it this time with no help, right? I did provide a whole bunch of specs for Russell, and this is normal. So the like redlining and more mock-ups, and this is just all the fonts and colours that we'd need to use. Another thing I found is it's really great to get everyone involved right at the start, and this is something that a lot of designers aren't necessarily comfortable with, but it's great to get buy-in for the concept. And we personally still use a lot of pixel perfect mock-ups, and the reason that's okay is because everyone already agrees with the project before we start writing code. So in terms of wastage and backwards and forwards, there isn't too much of that. Having said that, we also, as you saw, there was sort of automated asset exporting. I think that's absolutely vital, and anyone who's sort of hand cutting things out and wasting time doing that, that can certainly be a really a big issue. So it's far better to have automated exporting. That way you can make changes, and it's really just a matter of, if I'm just changing images, the developer, Russell, just has to update the repo. That's it. So that's why, again, it's good for designers to have control and be actually, learn how to use Git, which isn't that difficult for basic use.
I mean, the other thing we do at Shifty Jelly is Chris will work a lot in Sketch, and I'll just open his Sketch files and I'll do measurements in there. I can see that's 30 from the corner. I can see this in particular high. I can cut and paste the colours out of there. I know that's not quite what you're asking, but that's how we operate, is that I can get everything from your Sketch file that I need to recreate it in code. There are some things that try and bridge the gap. I find, I don't know, like a lot of them don't do things the way you want to do them, or they're a little bit sort of tricky. But I mean, I'm sure that there are tools to help with that. Do we have any other questions?
Yes.
If you look at a project that has both an iOS and an Android user base or target, and you need, and the designers have decided that maybe material design is the style to use, what discussion would you have to promote the Apple standards as opposed, or have a difference between the Android and iOS designs, or whether you should be doing Google style controls or like the iOS?
Yeah, so I guess the question was, Google has a very defined style, it's called Material Style. Apple has their own user interface guidelines. What do you do when you're making something cross-platform? Do you pick one or the other? What we generally do is you want your apps to behave in a similar way. You don't want to create like an extremely different interaction model on one side and on the other, because that's confusing. If I'm switching platforms or I'm showing people the app, they're like, these don't come from the same company. But you don't want to have the same visuals. We don't believe in taking material design and putting it stamp on the iOS world so your two apps physically look identical. That's a weird goal to have, because users on one platform expect one thing, users on the other platform expect another thing, and I guess that's where you get your designer involved, and you say, look, we want these things to look really similar, we want them to look like they came from the same brand, but we don't want the same interaction models. Like in Pocket Casts, you've got the slide over thing is a really simple example. That's an Android control that comes out page view or something. On iOS, we don't have that because it's not really a native like control of that platform, so we tend to leave that out. But the menu structure of the app is very similar. Like if you have a look at Pocket Casts on iOS, Pocket Casts on Android, they don't look the same, but they're structured in a very similar way. So that's what we try and aim for. All right, we're getting the time to kill it. Thank you.
Right, cool.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Oh, actually, very important. If you'd like to know all the tools we used and other bits and pieces that we referenced, that's the URL there, including links to all the templates I used as well. So.
Yeah, and everything's on there, like the designs, the code. I don't know if there's anything useful in the code, but that's all up there as well.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you very much.